How's it going, everyone? Scott McKay here at Createx Colors Studios. We're going to do a cool piece today. We're going to do a little biomechanical monochromatic piece, really just using one color. We're going to use Candy 2O Black over silver base that we've already based, cleared, and sanded, and I've applied this mask. And the mask is basically similar to this. It's going to be similar to this piece here, a little bit different. We're going to change it up, throw some different tubing in. It's a little bit different structure, but it's going to be the same premise. This is using one of my biomechanical brush sets on my McKay Fine Art store, as well as I'm going to make this product available as well. So if you guys want to do this yourself down the road, you can do it. So we're going to get started. What we have here is the background piece. So when you work on a piece like this, it's on a light panel, we're using dark, we're going to work from the background out. And it's in a sequential masking order. And when you do it that way, you're never putting mask on and then taking mask off, putting it back on. We're working our way out of the piece. So we're going to work from background to foreground. So to start that, we're going to use some tape, put it on here, and I'll explain as we go from there. Okay, so I'm going to work the background, and if you look at my original piece here, you see all these little tubes and extra stuff in the background. So I lay those first, and then I'm going to mask my way out of it. So I'm just going to make something different. I'm just going to make like cables kind of coming down. I'm going to just use, this is 1/2-inch tape. I'm going to do it on both sides, but I'm going to be different. I'm not going to make it symmetrical. It'll be an asymmetrical piece. Yeah, let's go straight down with that one. I'm going to use different sizes, and when I use different sizes, a lot of times I'll use different colors, so I'll know which ones to pull off first and last. So we're going to go this one here. We'll make this one kind of go around. It'll go straight. It'll go straight down through here and maybe curl over. We'll just bend this tape. A little tension on the tape, pull it over. Just make something cool and different. We're going to have this one just come straight through. Different sizes, different types. This is 1/8 inch. You know what? I don't like this one. That's the fun part about tape. You can just play with it and do something different. Just setting up things. And we're just going to run this one right down here and run it off. Like these tubes are just going off like that. And I think that's good. That's enough to make a little interest. So now we can get painting. So what we're going to do is we're going to work from back to front. We're going to make this a really cool kind of gritty texture, and I'll show you a cool trick for that. First I'm going to use is the Candy 2O Black. I've done 1:1, 40/50 to Candy 2O Black. Now it's set up for airbrushing. I haven't put any reducer in it. If you need reducer for flow, I am using a micron, so as I get down to little details, I'll probably start adding reducer in 50%, not 50, 5% intervals until I'm happy with it, okay? For the background, I don't need to do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fog in the background. I'm going to show you a really cool trick to add texture that you can do in the beginning. Can't really do it at the end because it'll mess up the rest of your painting. So you be strategic with this. I'm just putting a little bit down, fogging it. Not really going to care how I did it. I'll let that sit for a sec. Now, I'm going to actually take water. And we're going to spritz water on there, and it's going to start to actually run it and kind of make it look really kind of spotty and goopy. And if you'll come over and look at my original here, you can see all this spotted texture up in this background. That's how I did it. I just used a little bit of water. I'm going to get a paper towel first, and we can dab and do some stuff like that. We'll spray it first. And just let it eat through the candy a little bit. And you can do this a few times. Let it work. You know, you can blot. And then you can blow more air on it. You can also use reducer and mist it on there. We're going to do a few tricks like this throughout the piece. Or you can put more paint on there and get it really wet and let it almost run down. You know, and every time you do it, it'll be different. I'm just see what happens. But you understand why you can't do this later, because once you do artwork in here, this will reactivate the candy and wet it down, so you don't want to do that. But see, I'm getting this kind of cool look now. And I can mix this with like texture templates and stencils that are already out there. But this gives you a really cool organic look. It's not always the same thing every time. So as that's drying, I'll use some texture stencils as well. Put it in there. I'm not worried about smudging or smearing. This is going to be so far in the background, it doesn't really matter. Just, even if you think it's going to be wrong, it's probably cool when it's done. So just let stuff happen. By working back to front, the great thing about that is every time you do the next layer and you paint that, you can keep progressively making this darker and darker. And that's the real benefit to a candy or a transparent, is it builds layer by layer. So the more you spray it, the closer and closer to 100% black or whatever color you're working will get, like 3, 4, 5, 6 passes. So I think that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll spray it one more time. And the air is going to aid in drying it. Because what's happening is everything under this tape, see, is still crisp and clean. Okay, so that's why we work in a sequential masking order like this. So now what I'm going to do is I'll start drop shadowing. I'll drop shadow all these tubes and around this border. So I'm going to do the tubes first because I'm working from the background, so the tubes are creating a shadow, then I'll remove the tubes, and then I'm going to go around this whole perimeter, and the drop shadow for that will drop shadow on the tubes themselves. So you keep stacking your way out. This is a project I've done in some of my workshops and classes, and it really helps you understand, the whole dark to light, working from back to front, and sequential masking order. It's a great exercise, and it helps when you get into more complex stuff. And I am out of paint. So I've already pre-mixed up my candy. I've let it sit for a little bit. When you do the 40-50 into the candy black, let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes. Let everything kind of, gel together and kind of become one. And you'll notice it sprays, amazing. You got to give it a little bit of time. So I'm still going, still fading that in. Okay. So now I'm going to drop shadow. Whenever we do artwork, I'm usually going top-down light source. My light source is coming down, so therefore it's casting shadows underneath everything. So it's going to be shadowed heavy under here, shadows under here, all the tubes, the shadows going to be here. Basically, a standard drop shadow. So I'm going to follow along this edge. And right here, I'm going to flip from this side to this side, because the light's coming down, it's creating a shadow here, here. We wouldn't want the shadow to fall this way because that'd be now above the piece. So now it's going to go below. Okay, that's where you want it. You want it right there. And I'm going to make sure I spray enough on my piece, on the tape itself, let the overspray carry so you get a good delineation. And I'm going to repeat this process on all these tubes. Same thing, coming in. I'm just going to follow all these down. These little ones, you can just kind of go right on them. And this one will come way off like this, so it's creating a drop shadow that creates a lot of depth. And then we'll come across. I'm going to go on this one. And this is really background filler, so it doesn't have to have a lot going on. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to remove whatever's on top first. Because we're working from the bottom up painting, so we're removing the top tape first. So I know this one is on top, so let's make sure I get enough coverage. I'll pull that nice and clean. Blow some air. I got a little bit that ran through because I didn't have my tape pushed down really well. It's an easy fix. It's going to have so much grit and texture here. That's just going to add to the piece. So now this tube is going over that tube. So we're going to make sure we drop shadow across that one. Make sure we drop shadow across that. And since it's a tube, the drop shadow will have a little bit of radius to it, not a straight line. Good delineation. And now we'll put a little core shadow to make it look rounded like a tube. So here, right up in here. If you're having trouble freehand, you can use a stencil edge or a hard edge and just kind of put it up. Yeah, we'll try it. We'll use a piece of paper here. Let me grab one. If you're having trouble, you can take a piece of paper, even hold it up a little bit, and just mist it and get a little bit of shadow on the edge. The more you practice freehand, these are great exercises to practice freehand because it doesn't really have to be perfect. It had a lot of stuff going on, so you can really loosen up and just kind of let things happen and go with it. So I'm going to do that one, and this one goes over that one. So see, now it looks like that's over that. I'm just going to put a little bit on there, not much. A little bit here, wherever they crisscross. And then I'll pull the larger tube. Oops, oops, yeah, that one got trapped because I got to pull this one first, which means I got to pull this one first. Let me go back in the correct order. So there we go. Pull that one down and across, and the panel fell. And so magnets didn't really hold. We'll put a piece of tape on this and that will be fine. We're not going to edit that out. Nope. This is what really happens in a paint shop. Stuff falls, stuff happens, mistakes happen. You fix it, you move on. It's not the end of the world. I've said it in a bunch of classes with a bunch of other instructors. The difference between a professional and an amateur, professionals know how to fix the mistakes because they've done enough of them. You're never going to be professional or really good until you make a lot of mistakes and fix them. And I've made enough of them. And still making them to this day. Okay, good. You can put all sorts of, like when I did these tubes here, there's all sorts of little lines and little things, little patterns. You can do a whole ton of stuff, but we're going to keep this pretty simple. We don't want to drag out for a 3-hour video, but you can surely put that much time into a piece like this without a problem. So I should have drop shadow right there, and I didn't. Easy fix. Put it on, little shadow, pull it off. That's it. So now I got to make sure I drop shadow this whole unit around the edges. And I'm not using any other colors. This is one color. It's just black candy, and by stacking, you get all these multiple tones from almost no color to fully capped off 100% black. I still got paint in there. I'm going to finish these tubes up, and we'll move on to the next section. So now we're at the next stage. We're going to do these tubes that are coming off the skull, like this. This is part of my biomechanical brush set. This is a set in like a design software like Adobe Illustrator or Corel. You can draw a line and then add this brush to it, and it creates the shape of whatever you want. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. So what I've done, laid them here. I've already picked this side, started picking this. A few ways to pick vinyl. You can use a pick tool like this. Gently go in. And be careful not to poke into your base color too much. You can use a razor blade. That can be a little bit more dangerous. Or you can use these plastic razor blades. These are by a company called Scrape Right. They're available at many distributors. And I'm just going to go through and pull them all off. On a vertical surface, the pick's usually easier. So I'm just going to go quickly through this. When you're doing work like this, it sounds quick. Like, oh, it'll be quick. Price accordingly, because you do 8 feet of this stuff, it takes a long time. On a piece like this, yeah, not too bad. But if it takes 5 minutes to do 1 foot, you know, it's not going to take, 5 times 3 to do 3 foot. It's probably going to take an hour to do that 3 foot section, because you'll get bored and tired of picking all this. But that was pretty quick and easy. So this again is a tube, just like this one here is a tube. So same premise. I'm going to get rid of this stuff first. My wife finds these all over the house, drives her crazy. So I'm going to do that same core shadow, just like any cylindrical tube. I'm going to run that first. You're going to have one side that's more dominant than the other, so your shadow side will have a heavier core shadow. And then what I'm going to make sure I fog the whole thing with candy, because remember, candy stacks, so this core shadow would just get darker when I mist over the whole thing, because it's stacking on top of each other. Now I'm just going to go hit each one of these. So this is a soft dagger stroke, and I'm coming from the dark side. And it'll really make this whole tube look round. For those who are curious, I'm sure I'll get asked, I'm running about 45 PSI. I tend to paint a little higher, and my paint's fairly thin, but I'm moving fast enough to compensate for that. Ideally, you probably want to be around 25, 30 PSI, little reduction, and you won't get blowouts. If you're getting blowouts and like spiders that kind of do that, either your air pressure is too high or your paint's too thin, one or the other. So you got to kind of balance it. You can avoid it by moving or spending more distance. Just make sure you hit everything really quick. This one, you got to make sure you kind of hit it all, because once you start pulling this next little piece, you really can't put it back very easily. You can, but it just takes, it's a little bit of a struggle. All right, now I'll go in. Oh, I missed one little piece. Let's pick that. Okay, so now I'm going to pull the outer edge. So I use a plotter for a lot of involved stuff like this, a lot of repetitive stuff, because A, you don't really have stencils for this, and B, if you had a stencil for this, a hard stencil, it would be the same thing every time over and over again. With this brush set, things like it, you can change it and tweak it and do something different sizes every time, different lengths. And there's nothing better than a plotter cutter for that. So I've integrated a lot of plotting techniques in my other videos, on my Thin Air Graphics YouTube channel and some of my other products and stuff like that. So there's a lot of information on that stuff on those videos of applying mask and cutting mask. We're not going to go over all that with this. And now I'm just going to run the same shadow right up the side. So now that tube's starting to look round, we'll go back and we'll highlight it at the end with some white or a different technique I'm going to show you. But this gets it all in here. And now I'm going to make sure that the skull and this, there's a gas mask in here like this. We're going to make sure that casts a shadow down to the tubes now as well. Remember, you're always making sure you're shadowing what's underneath to give depth. When this is done, you'll have so many layers of depth, 5 or 6 layers of depth to it. If you need stronger coverage, you could use a different airbrush and mix the black a little thicker so it covers a little faster. I usually like a 4 to 5 coat build. 4 to 5 coat build gives me freedom to build tonal value with one color without having to constantly switch colors out. Cool, so that's pretty much the background. Now I'm going to go around this whole edge. I'm going to really push this all back. Hit that hard. And that is going to be the very background, which is all this back here, and that sets us up for the skull. I'm going to pull the skull right now, and I'll show you how to cut the stencil in a second on that, on the next part. So I'm just going to pull this out, and then we'll get to the next step after that. Okay. So I pulled off the mask here. I pulled it off the center inside the mask and like the gas mask mouth. And now, come down here to the bench. This is our skull reference we're going to use. It's an image of a skull. And what I've done is I printed this the same size as the plot file, so it's all 1-to-1, so it lines up. So what you're going to do is you're going to go around, you cut the perimeter all out, and then I'm cutting the eye sockets. And what I do first is I cut the detail inside, you know, like this piece, all these little pieces. I cut this, and then I cut the outer shape of the eye. And I'm not going super nuts on it, you know, just getting close to registration, just like, you know, my pack of skull stencils. And I don't cut the eye all the way out. I cut it so it's a hinge, so you can pop it in and pop it out. I go around all the pieces, little details, and for all these little kind of marks in the skull, I just take the blade and I start popping it out like this to make like a texture effects system. And the more you do that, just like a cooking show, this one's already done, you have your solid mask, and now I have the skull here with all the details cut out. Look at the back side, you can see all the little holes, and you can add more. Shoot, you can use a Dremel if you want. But the skull detail, I got the eyes here, and these just flip out and flip back and forth. So you almost have two stencils in one, and then the cheekbone are right here, or the temple bones. And this will go right up to our board. I'll just use a piece of tape, and this will line up with our image like that. And I've cut out the cheekbones here. This is how you get it sized 1-to-1. So now you've created your own freehand stencil shield to complete the project from there. Now I'm going to go back to the black and get painting. So we're on, we're ready to go. We're going to do two things here. We're going to be using the black candy like we've been using. I'm going to have another airbrush here. So if you have two airbrushes, it makes it really easy. This has straight 40-20 reducer in it. I'm going to show you a trick to use with this. As opposed to doing white for highlights, we're going to use the reducer to wash away the paint and make those bright highlights instead of putting white. You won't get that flip that you get over metallic silver by doing white. It's a cool trick, so stay tuned for that. So stencil, super easy at this point. Very little registration. If you've seen some of my other videos, less is more. You start slow, you build as you go. Because I don't want it to look stenciled when it's done. Finding those details. All these little details in here, getting those in. Now I'm folding back the eye. See how I'm doing that? And that detail's already here. I'm going to spray like inside the skull. I'm not going to spray right to the edge. Skulls don't have a super sharp edge on it. It's a minimal edge. It's a soft roll, so you don't want to be super hard into the skull socket. So I put more on the edge and let the overspray just get to the edge of the template. Stencil, template, cutout, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. Okay, I'm going to fold this back. And I'm going to, you can put up another image. You can tape another image next to it. Refer back to, as you pull it off. Just so you can see. And you can keep kind of checking it. So you can just check it and see the skull. Not a lot, just enough to register, like I said. And that fell too. Shh. And you can pull it off. Now you got the general registration of a skull, and this one's got a natural dent in it from when it first fell. You can keep coming back to the skull and putting it back in, but this is where I like to start going freehand. So the more you know about freehand anatomy, the better. Start punching out that detail, working from your photo reference. I'm going to run freehand from there. Before I get too far, I want to show you that trick on how I do some of the erasing technique, but not done with an eraser. You can do this technique with an eraser, or you can do it liquid like this, what I'm going to do. Learned this from a lot of good painters. So, just straight reducer. You can also use isopropyl alcohol work. You can use 4011 or 4013 as well. The different aggressiveness of the solution will erase it faster or slower, so you can kind of dial it. So if you come in really close in here, I'll zoom in. I'm going to put a core highlight just using reducer, no paint. You can tone the airbrush down a little bit. If it's too much pressure, you'll get a little splattering, but see how it's erasing the paint? Now I'm doing all these little textures and kind of grit with like liquid erasing, basically. So remember at the beginning when I did all the water here? Kind of same thing. And I'll do more of this as I go, but the key to doing this is you don't want to flood a ton of paint and then try to erase it, because you get too much to build through and just get really murky. You want to do it in layers, in soft layers. Soft layer of paint, then a little erasing, and you get this really gnarly texture. So watching here, I'm going to run a highlight right on that edge. So if you see an erasing technique, same premise. Cool technique. I'm going to keep doing some more, do details, and keep working the skull out.